live in a world that is filled with subjectivity. What this means is that we all have our own personal lens through which we view the world. If we don't try to understand where someone else is coming from, it can be very easy to misunderstand them. And we all have experienced what misunderstandings can create in our own ways. Misunderstandings are born from our different perceptions, which can often come out in the form of words. There are so many ways in which a single word can be interpreted differently, depending on the tone with which it was spoken, the context, our body language while we said it, the medium we used to communicate. Or a word can also have multiple meanings, be it obvious or hidden. Today, I want to talk about a word that is understood in more ways than one, and also explore a version of it that feels healthy to integrate into our own lives. But first, we will understand why this word even exists in the first place, and also explore its existing meanings. Ultimately, my intention in this video is to share what this word looks like through my lens and the meaning that I have carefully crafted for it. Let's understand optimism. You must have heard people say it is naive to be optimistic. What does this statement really mean? The word naive originates from the Latin word nativus, which means native or natural. Today, the word naive refers to someone who lacks wisdom, judgment, experience, or is innocent. If we look at our history of seeing ourselves above nature and exploiting it, we can understand why the meaning of natural in the word nativus became lack of wisdom, judgment, or innocence. Because the nature we exploited, be it plants, animals, or minerals, didn't have mechanisms in place for coping with our exploitation. This is what results in us using the word naive for anyone or anything that is pure, natural, or without ulterior motives. But the truth is, anyone who thinks we have a superior intelligence to nature itself just because we use our creativity in destructive ways for our own benefits is gravely mistaken. Anyway, I do think that it is natural to be both optimistic and pessimistic because they are just coping mechanisms for the fact that we exist. We are meaning-making creatures. Optimism and pessimism are just two opposite directions in which our conclusions are formed about life. Our brain constantly makes predictions of how things could go based on our past experiences and some other factors, like the information we gather through our senses and the patterns we are able to recognize around us. This is a survival mechanism that is deeply embedded inside all of us and was passed to us through our evolutionary ancestors. We all know what it feels like to fail, to endure pain, and to have our hearts broken. It doesn't feel good, does it? We try our best to avoid experiencing those things, but the fact that we experienced them before means that we might experience them again. Suffering is always a possibility. Optimism and pessimism are just two polar ways in which our brains deal with this future possibility. It's also important to note that optimism and pessimism are two poles of a spectrum, and where we are on this spectrum is not always fixed and can fluctuate depending on situations, mindset shifts, external changes, etc. Even a person who is usually very optimistic can have pessimistic thoughts when in a difficult situation, and vice versa. While we might not always be able to control our placement on this spectrum, we can definitely work towards moving to our preferred location. Now let's look at optimism through a common lens. To some people, optimists are people who disregard reality and have unrealistic hopes and expectations. These people keep wishing their dreams or ideal situations would come true without actually putting in the work or changing themselves. Let's call this version blind optimism. Then there's a healthier version of optimism where people actually work on themselves and their future and have positive thoughts about it. Overall, the main difference between mainstream views of optimism and pessimism is that optimism is a feeling or hope of good things happening, and for pessimism, it is a feeling or prediction of bad things happening. On a deeper level, I think what separates them is the fear of suffering. On the surface, pessimism might look like a better way of predicting unpleasant events and coping with the fact that we might get hurt in the future. Always being on the lookout for how something might go wrong or how someone might hurt us can give us the feeling of being prepared to cope with suffering. But the truth is, always focusing on or looking out for the darkness to avoid it is the very thing that ensures we never look at the light. In this way, pessimism can be the very thing that perpetuates our suffering. On the other hand, while optimism is usually considered a better alternative for coping with the possibility of suffering, it surely has its flaws. While it is good to expect better things in life because it helps us to look at our lives in a more positive light and feel good in the process, always thinking or hoping for a good outcome can ultimately make us more miserable when we are faced with a negative or undesirable outcome unexpectedly. So, what should we do? Be pessimistic and always be in survival mode, or be optimistic and get hurt in the process by the realities of life? I say double down on optimism because being hurt is inevitable in life. If you can get to a place where you can look at hardship in its eyes and still be able to see light reflected in it, you will stop being so afraid of suffering. Okay, I know what I just said sounds kind of abstract, so allow me to explain. Basically, what I am trying to say is be optimistic, and when suffering catches you by surprise, allow yourself to feel hurt and grieve. Once you're done with that, ask yourself questions like, how does this situation help me become stronger or more resilient? How can this situation open up better doors for me? Or how can I be grateful for and celebrate small wins while I'm in this horrible situation, etc. In this approach, our aim is not to avoid looking at negative or uncomfortable situations, but instead to really look at them and still find some light within them. The curiosity to search for a silver lining, paired with optimism itself, can be a game changer. The ability to see light in the darkest places is such a gift and an indicator of strength, in my opinion. Thinking good is great, but seeing good is on a whole another level. It is something that we're either born with or can cultivate with practice and purifying our own intentions. Hoping and expecting goodness is one thing, but you can only see the goodness that you hold within yourself. It can definitely take time and practice to download this version of optimism within ourselves. But remember, no matter how far off you think you are from goodness, it is an inherent part of you. If you find this difficult to accept, all you need to do is look at your own darkness with acceptance. because you can only see the light in its presence. And that is all I have to express for today. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to what I have in my heart. If this video has impacted you in any way, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with your loved ones. Thank you so much for coming on this art trip with me, and I'll see you in the next one.